I'm all wireless.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 59 of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. I'm your host, John, Strategy Wargamer. I'm here with my faithful co-hosts, Matt, Historical Gamer, and Eric, Tortuga Power. How you guys doing?
It's so awkward. Every time you ask it, how are you guys doing? I don't know if I'm supposed to go first, if THG is supposed to go first. I'm doing great.
What does your heart tell you, Tortuga?
I don't know. It's well, I'm an egocentric person, so I should go first. And then I should also go last, and everything in the middle.
Sounds about right.
His mind says no, but his body says yes.
I don't really want to know what Tortuga's body is saying.
Oh, really? That's not what you said a little
Last
bit
night?
ago. May I quote the infamous Discord? "How do I regain your trust, Daddy Tortuga Power?" said the historical gamer.
Damn you! Yeah, so the context here is that Tortuga was telling me, oh, no, don't worry. You don't have the ability to send out at everyone or at here on my Discord. You can do it if you want. It won't work. And I typed in at here in this channel, got a little pop-up that said, warning, this is going to go to over 200 people. Rather than screenshotting that and just posting that, I decided, I wonder if this is really telling the truth. And it was.
That's good to know that they implemented some kind of barrier to everyone and at here spam, because as I mentioned, that's only been used 3 times in the entire existence of my Discord server. So you're one of the lucky few.
I knew I was special. My parents told me that growing up, and so it
was all building for this moment.
It was, and you know what? It was.
And now that's it. That's the climax. Everything's downhill from here.
But you know what? It was worth it.
I definitely have to use explicit on this podcast.
I have been playing, to get us back into podcast territory, I've been playing Decisive Campaigns Barbarossa. Thanks for asking, John.
What caused you to play that? That game's been out for a while.
Oh, man, okay. The truth is, I think that I'm gearing up for some War in the East, because War in the East 2 is coming out, and I have this feeling, like, you have invested the time into learning War in the Pacific, so, like, I don't know, you're like some kind of saint for having done that, Matt, but I live in regret of never having really conquered the mechanics of War in the East. I'm able to play it. I can play it through, I'm actually reasonably successful, but the thing I have a hard time with is that I don't understand some of the mechanics of like the resupply, the truck mechanics. There's like some rules. I think I've read most of the manual, like 200 pages of it or something, but there's things that I either missed or read but didn't retain. Things like pulling your troops 2 hexes off the front or 6 hexes, whatever it is, in the winter to prevent massive attrition. I mean, the game is just so complex, and unfortunately I like to play as efficiently as possible. So that always has stunted me from just playing the damn game. And now I'm thinking about doing a co-op series, and maybe Matt will join me for that. And this is all to gear up for War in the East 2, which, I mean, we don't know when it's going to be released, but everyone is saying it's going to be in 2020, so that could be soon.
Yeah, I see Wargamer posted it on 2020.
Yeah, I hope it's 2020. That would be good. I mean, I think that's what they've said it's supposed to be. So,
what are the differences between War in the East 1 and War in the East 2?
I don't think they've really gone into that all that much.
Yeah, I mean, it's based on the War in the West engine, actually. So what we can assume is the very abstracted way they were dealing with the aircraft, at least, will be modified. I think it's also a map of the entirety of Europe. So those are things I've picked up here and there. I'm not sure. It could even be wrong information, but that's what I've heard. That the map is the entire Europe plus Russia.
Oh, wow.
And then also, yeah, huge. And then also they're dragging over, probably, I'm imagining they're going to refine or polish or, tweak the aircraft system in War in the West. But that added a whole depth, the aircraft's management system.
Is it going to be like regimental level, brigade level, you think?
You're talking about for the ground combat units. I don't remember what. I don't think it goes any lower than brigade. I mean, the composition of a unit is all spelled out. War in the East is. I mean, this is one of its claims to fame. Is its combat resolution engine is insanely detailed, and they actually like count the number of troops. I mean, I think that every counter is a division. I don't think that they get. No, that's not true. You can break some divisions down into brigades, but anyway, I mean, it's a very complicated game, and I don't know what the War in the East 2 will do, but it's intimidating. I would say it's intimidating. And that's why I need to do a co-op game of it so that I'm forced to play it.
I can't even imagine how long I'm just looking at the screenshot on wargamer.com. I can't even imagine how long one turn would take. I mean, it looks... wow.
Oh, you don't have to imagine. I can tell you. So just to give you a reference point, War in the Pacific, I think, is, like, out of all the games I've ever seen, holds the record for the longest time it takes for a single turn. Matt can attest to this, I think. The very first turn, there's a YouTube video tutorial from some person I don't know, but they had a pretty in-depth, thorough first turn of War in the Pacific done. And that tutorial video for turn 1 takes over 8 hours.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's a full day to do one turn.
Wow.
Anyway, in War in the East, there's Reaper, I think his name is. I can't remember. I might be getting that wrong. No, Marauder. Marauder has a very good tutorial series on the first turn, and I think that one's maybe 3 hours, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. So, just to give you a perspective, that's the first turn. That might be a more difficult turn. I think that subsequent turns take less time.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
How long does a turn take you for War in the Pacific, Matt?
Once I'm going, past the early days in the campaign, probably anywhere between 2 to 4 hours.
Oh, wow.
I usually only show 1 to 2 hours in my videos. The initial setup, though, is a lot. I think XTRG, who's playing against me in a play-by-email game, his first turn was like a 12-hour setup, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, oh my gosh.
I mean, it was his first game of War in the Pacific, so he was trying to learn things, too. So it's, but...
This is XTRG's first game in War in the Pacific? I didn't know that.
Well, my game is, but he's played multiple games. So our game's going, but I think he started another one against someone else after we started, and now he's playing another one against another very well regarded player, and that one's kind of picking up the pace. So they're kind of catching up on us. But yeah, I believe it was his first attempt. He might have done some individual. I think he did Coral Sea or something like that for a Matrix stream versus the AI or something like that. But this is his first full playthrough of the grand campaign in any event.
It's in one way it's kind of reassuring that satisfying that there is a game out there or games out there like this where if you want to really dive into the nitty and gritty, down to the division or even brigade level on this massive theater, you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are 3 games that have made me... Okay, the mark of a good game for me is when I'm thinking about it, when I'm not playing it. When I'm daydreaming about it, or if I'm driving somewhere, if I am so excited about what's going on that I start almost dialoguing with myself about strategy while I'm driving. And that's happened for Eastern Front type games. That's happened for Decisive Campaigns Barbarossa. I know War in the East fits in there too. And the other one is actually Heartsfire 3. You can play any of the Heartsfires, I'm sure, and get the Eastern Front feel, but Heartsfire 3 was so detailed, I mean, the province sizes were so small, that you actually had to do tactical maneuvers on your grand strategy game, which is, the reason why a lot of people don't like the game, because it's so detailed. But it's also pretty darn cool once you've invested the, unfortunate huge number of hours that you need to get the game to that point, as Germany or as the Soviet Union. And the order of battles are just monstrosities. But once you've got all that put together, it's extremely rewarding. Obviously, it's the same kind of thing with any game. If you're able to design your own units let's say in like a 4X game, if you're able to design your own spaceship, you just feel much more attachment and you're much more invested in the outcome of battles, knowing that that's the unit you built. And there is a little, I find that I'm much more, I don't know, Hearts of Iron 3 units, the fact that you built them yourselves, like you invested the IC into making them, you feel much more like a parent guarding them into battle. So, and more in the East and Decisive Campaigns Barbarossa, I don't feel nearly the same like level of connection to my units. It's more, here's a bunch of units, go and conquer. So anyways, those 3 games I think are really, if you're serious about playing a pretty hardcore Eastern Front game, I would recommend any of the 3 of those.
I'll keep that in mind. Are you guys, so that was, so I'm assuming that's coming out in 2020, so that's going to be your next long love affair. So I'm kind of curious what...
This has been an interesting episode. Love affairs and other things, yeah.
Well, I'm kind of curious because you wrote something on, I think, was it Reddit or I don't know, on the Discord. Something like Jean's really gonna like this or find this very interesting. So it's been revolving in my head what you've been thinking, what you've been playing. So what am I gonna find extremely interesting?
Well, this is not the game I've been playing the most. So there's 2 games I want to talk about, but I will talk about the game that I think you'll be intrigued by first. I'm not sure I love it, but I did buy it. And it's a game called Pacific Fire. It is made by a developer that is called Whereaway Studios, which why you would name your studio after such a disastrously bad aircraft in World War II, I don't know. But I think the Whereaway was like actually something tied. I'm not sure. It's tied to Australia. It might have had some Aboriginal background. The name anyway. I could be wrong on that. But it was the name of one of the aircraft that was used in World War II in the Pacific Theater and was actually manufactured in Australia. So there's probably an element of Australia pride there. But anyway, the game is called Pacific Fire. It is not available on PC. It is only available on Google Play and the iOS store.
Oh.
So I thought you would be intrigued by the fact that I've been playing a mobile game.
Yeah, I'm very shocked. This is like... Wow. What made you... So you must have been bored one day and said, you know what? I want to see if Jean is right to see if strategy gaming works on the phone. So,
I wouldn't say that. I was just scrolling through the phone and I saw something on... I forget how I saw it. I think I saw it on... It might have been on wargamer.com. It was on a website somewhere. They mentioned it. Oh, no, I remember what it was. This is really great with me not being sure of anything. I'm sure this will make for a great podcast. It was retweeted. Something about the game was retweeted by one of the Burden of Command developers.
Oh.
And so then I looked in and I was like, this looks kind of interesting. And it's a Pacific theater of World War II, so kind of right up my alley. Of the Second World War. It's I think a $2.99 game on the App Store. It's not free, so I did pay for it and I did download it. Definitely not pay to win or anything like that. Basically, it's like a map that I think looks a little bit like Hearts of Iron, looks a little bit like something that's trying to be 1940s-esque. But it's just basically a map of the Pacific Theater in World War II. And you've got all these different island bases and everything like that are represented by like an army counter if there's army troops there, by an Air Force counter if there's airplanes there, or by a ship counter if there's naval units there. And essentially there's a series of different scenarios that can kind of narrow your focus to certain parts of the Pacific over a certain period of time, or there's this grand campaign that allows you to play through the whole Second World War in the Pacific Theater. So I think my War in the Pacific kick is what really got me to look into this game more. And it's pretty simple to play. You just click on a ground unit, tap on the island you want it to go to, you tell it to move, and they'll launch an attack on that location. If you're launching land troops against islands without any naval support or air support, they're going to get slaughtered probably. But you can send naval units in as well, tell them to bombard, in which case they'll bombard enemy troops on the shore. You can not tell them to bombard, and then they'll kind of launch area denial or sea operations against enemy shipping. Your air units can bombard ground units, or you can tell them to bomb enemy naval units. There's different types of units, so like they have the actual makeup of different squadrons throughout the war. So you'll have TBF Avengers are your torpedo bombers. You want to use them against enemy shipping more than you want to use them against ground targets. B-24 bombers or B-17s or B-29s are strategic bombers, so you're better off using those as ground bombardment. I'm not sure if there's like an ability to bomb industrial targets or not. I haven't gotten there yet. They've got a host of different aircraft units starting in the beginning of the war with like F-4F Wildcats. Later in the war, you've got the Hellcat. So like there's this element of your technology evolves over time, your industry grows and shrinks over time, you get reinforcements. It's a turn-based game, so basically you tell all the units where you want them to go, you point on the map where you want them to go, a little arrow is drawn, and then the AI does the same thing, and at the end of it all, you sort of see simultaneous resolution. It can be a little bit weird in that like there's nothing really preventing the Allies from sending a fleet off the coast of Japan at the beginning of the war, it doesn't seem like. So there are things that are a little bit odd to me. Because of all this being done simultaneously, you've got a lot of like crisscrossing of arrows. So like what you're trying to do doesn't always happen because the enemy kind of intercepts you, but it's not like in a way of them intercepting you mid-sea. It's just like for some reason your attack got like derailed. So like the messaging of the game could be a little bit better, but I do kind of like, at the end of every turn it tells you like you have 20,000 soldiers killed, 200 aircraft destroyed. Here's all the breakout of those. How many air crews were destroyed? How many sailors? How many warships? And it also makes me wonder if there's like an experience element thing where maybe your crews gain experience. Your troops have morale, they can gain or lose. It's a really interesting game. I think my biggest complaint is it doesn't rotate the screen, because I play it on my iPad and I can't it's always the vertical layout.
Really?
I can't get it to go into horizontal, which I think it was probably built for mobile phones and they just allow it to work on tablet, which is probably maybe why that works that way. But you hear me talking about it. I think it's an interesting mobile game that I've said it, there are not many games that look at the Pacific Theater of Operations in World War II, and this is one of them, although it doesn't really model logistics or supplies, as far as I can tell, so it's certainly not War in the Pacific level, simulation, but it is, for a mobile game, I think it's doing things I would like to see mobile gaming do. I'm not ready to say it does it well yet, but it certainly is better than anything else out there I've seen.
Let me ask you something, guys. So I mentioned this previously on the show. One of my favorite World War II Pacific games is Pacific Theater of Operations. I'm kind of curious. Why do you feel like we haven't had like a reboot of that game? Basically one developer making that game. I know it's owned by Koei, but there's so many games that kind of rip off another one. Make a game like PTO with a different name. Why do you think we haven't seen something like that yet?
Well, there were like 5 PTOs, right? Like PTO was still making games on PlayStation 3 not that long ago. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a good answer for you. There are games out there. Maybe they don't get attention because they're not any good. I don't know. I think the European theater gets a lot more attention. It's the quote unquote sexy theater, if you will. Everybody wants to be killing Nazis, hopefully, anyway. And, the Eastern Front, certainly in terms of scale, was something that I don't think the world has ever seen in a modern conflict anyway. I don't know. I think the European theater sells and the Pacific theater doesn't. And I think part of it is also the European theater is an easier narrative to tell as like a storytelling element, especially when you focus in, as most games that are made for American-centric audiences anyway do, on the American experience, where like, hey, the Americans landed in Midway and it was just this constant straight stream all the way through to victory in Germany. Like it's almost like the opening pages of a storybook, and it's a very clear narrative that people can follow on a map really easily. I think you see elements of that in Band of Brothers, right? Like this idea of this one unit landing in the start of the war, not even the start of the war, right? Because there was North Africa, there was Italy, all that. But like from that unit's own history anyway, they land in Normandy and they fight across the continent through a series of operations until the conclusion of the war. It's clean, it's easy, it's easy to tell a story around, it's easy to have people follow, it's the story that everybody knows. Whereas the Pacific, and I think you see a little bit of that in the miniseries, the Pacific is a little bit more convoluted and confusing. It's, no one unit. Multiple large American units landed in Normandy and fought through the entire campaign in Northern Europe until the end of the war. No one really did that in the Pacific. No one landed on Guadalcanal and then landed on Tarawa and then landed on Peleliu and then landed in the Philippines and then landed in Okinawa or Iwo Jima, then Okinawa, right? Like the Pacific was so sprawling that you didn't have that same kind of unit history that built up, because you'd have a unit that would land on Guadalcanal, and then their next operation might have been Peleliu, or their next operation might have been, in the Central Pacific. And 90% of the other campaigns had nothing to do with them. And God help the unit that would have been put in every one of those battles, because the Pacific theater was so intense and had such high casualty rates, it just wouldn't have been possible. But I think just from a narrative storytelling, it's a lot easier to tell the European story.
I think it also might be because, for game balance reasons, you can look at War in the Pacific for this. Essentially, the Japanese, they just have no chance of beating the Americans. And that, doesn't make for great gameplay, that you have one person who's on the back foot. So, you have War in the Pacific, which has to create rules, which says that if Japan has done this well, then the Japanese player wins. And even though the American player still wins the war. And, in the European theater, I know there's a lot of people who are going to point out that there was no chance Germany had to beat the Soviet Union, things like this.
War in the East would agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you can kind of think of it as I think it's a more balanced affair, where you actually have Germany's taken over areas and has a legitimate, let's say, what if the Molotov-Ribbentrop had lasted? What if they had actually not decided? I can't imagine. It's a fantasy to imagine this, but if you're playing Hearts of Iron 4 or Hearts of Iron 3, if you're playing any grand strategy game of World War II, you can choose, as if you want, maybe not to go fight the Soviet Union, and then Germany is extremely powerful. Or Japan. Unless they choose not to fight the Americans, first of all, what are they even going to do then?
Run out of oil.
The moment they fight. Yeah, the moment they fight the Americans, they're kind of screwed. So it's an interesting fight, maybe against the AI, but a game either has to blow away realism or completely dispense with historical realism in order to give Japan a fighting chance, or it has to build the huge inequality into the rules, which is still not as satisfying. If you're the American player and you're ending, in War in the Pacific, if you, Matt, end up defeating XRG in the game, but losing in victory points, it may not be that satisfying when you think, well, I'm going to win the war though, so.
I also do think there's an element of naval combat is not as popular, right? Like the European war was a land war. There were naval elements, but it was a land and air war. And when you look at the types of games that people tend to play the most of, they're big continental type war games, which is what Europe was. Unless you're looking at the Chinese theater, which people don't really look at a whole lot, it wasn't. The Pacific theater is a series of islands. It's basically moving from fortified rock to fortified rock. There's no grand maneuvers. There's no blitzkrieg. There's no tactical brilliance that gets displayed at any scale other than maybe the very small unit scale in the Pacific theater. Whereas, there are these massive pincer movements throughout all of Europe, throughout all the campaigns, these huge armored fists. People want to play with tanks. People want to play with aircraft. Maybe people want to play with battleships. I don't know. But I think history has shown that war games that focus on the Navy are far more rarely undertaken than games that focus on land combat for one reason or another.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So I also think it's more difficult. I don't know why, but it seems more difficult to get the naval combat side of things right. There's so many games that have tried and so few have succeeded. Probably, I mean, I think the game which has done the best job is Rule the Waves 2. And in terms of like carrier fights, I still think that game has a ways to go. So,
yeah. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see because I do feel like there's been a little bit of a resurgence in naval war games in the last few years. Rule the Waves 1, Rule the Waves 2, Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, the new Microprose stuff that's coming out, Cold Waters, all of those games. To me, it seems like there's more of a focus on naval combat than has been done in the past. So I'm really curious to see how that all plays out. There are some naval games, right? The original Microprose had Task Force 1942 or something like that. There were the Great Naval Battles by SSI. There's definitely naval games out there, but in terms of the number and the production qualities behind it, I think it's definitely been. It lags. Although, again, it seems like, at least in the wargaming space, the last couple of years and the next couple of years, that may be changing. I think your representation of the naval combat also plays a role, as you said, Tortuga. As you said that, I thought, yeah, you remember, think of Order of Battle Pacific. That was a Panzer General game that came out that was trying to say, hey, listen, Panzer General, you like that, let's play it in the Pacific. And I actually really liked it when it came out. But that game itself still focused on the land combat of the campaign primarily. It was like the Japanese drive down the Philippines, the landings in the Dutch East Indies. But it was primarily focused on the land combat. Naval combat was there, but it never felt right. And I think that's because a single torpedo from a torpedo bomber can cause a ship to explode into nothingness. Most of those land combat systems that cover those kind of games don't work that way. They're like, oh, -3 hit points, -2 hit points, -4 hit points. It's never minus all 10 hit points all at once to start. And so I think those kind of games, Order of Battle tried to kind of take a Panzer General style combat system and overlay it onto naval combat, and I don't think that works. So even when you do get the representation, I don't think you've always had the best representation of that combat.
Those are the guys that are doing the new Starship Troopers, aren't they?
I don't know. It was the Aristocrats or Art Aristocrats.
Yeah, those are the guys doing the Starship Troopers game.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure. I think wargaming systems have done a much better job, at least on the PC, of modeling land combat for many reasons, but that doesn't lend itself as well to the Pacific Theater either.
What was the other game that you were playing?
The other game that I've been playing a lot of lately, and I really like this game, is a game called Cauldrons of War, Eastern Front, 1944 or 1941, Barbarossa and Beyond. It is a turn-based war game. I don't know if I would call it a grand strategy game, but it's a turn-based war game that takes place at a really high level. The scale is very removed from the front. So basically, you play as either the Germans, or I guess actually the Axis powers, because the Finnish and Romanian sides have soldiers in it as well, or you play as the Soviets during the invasion of Germany in June of 1941. And you basically operate as like the supreme commander of all the forces on either side.
Ooh.
But it's turn-based, so randomly throughout the campaign, or not randomly, I think so they're pre-scripted, you get different events that you have to make decisions on. Like, for example, the first event that pops for the Germans are, how are you going to treat Soviet commissars when you capture them, right? They're members of the Soviet Communist Party. Are you going to shoot them on sight, which I think is historically what the Germans did? Or are you going to treat them like other prisoners of war and just sort of, treat them accordingly? And so you're given these types of decisions, and if you decide to shoot them, it increases a score called barbarism. If you let them go, or if you don't shoot them, it doesn't increase barbarism. And barbarism is one other thing is if you decide to shoot them, you also get cohesion bonuses to your soldiers. So it's kind of like the units are more, I don't know, they're happy you're shooting people innocently. But in any event, you get barbarism score when you do some of these activities, and as the barbarity score goes up, the Soviet troops fight harder, and they're more difficult to fight. But some of those decisions are more difficult to make because, you'd say, oh, we'll always choose the humane option because then you'll keep barbarity low. But the way the choices are structured is sometimes that can lead to cohesion penalties for your units. Sometimes it can lead to logistical problems for your units. I'm not sure I like the way it almost portrays war crimes as justifiable expedients. But it is an interesting mechanic. But where the game really shines is you're basically in charge of 4 different or 5 different army groups that are invading the Soviet Union. So you're in charge of Army Group North, Center, South, the Romanian front, and then 2 Finnish fronts. And you don't issue tactical orders. So you get a certain number of command points that are assigned to you every turn. And I can use those command points. I can go into one of the army groups, and I'm looking at one of them right now, Army Group North. It's the first turn of the game. Army Group North consists of the 18th Army, the 16th Army, and the 4th Panzergruppen. And so I can do 5 things with those 5 points. One of the things, and basically my goal is to move across the map of Russia to take key strategic points where I earn points. So there's a few ways you can do that. You can try and rush the objectives and just take territory as quick as you can, but that leaves Russian troops intact. Or you can try and destroy the Russian army, or you can kind of mix and match. And so if you wipe out all the Russian army early, that might make your job a little bit easier in the mid-game, but then new Soviet reinforcements could come in and you may have lost too much time, and it may be winter and other things like that. But if you move too quickly, you can get yourself into a situation where you penetrate really, really deep, but your logistical situation is such a train wreck that your offensive will bog down. But the decisions that you're making, it's like I've got these 3 army groups, and I'm not ordering tactics at all. So each army group has an operation that it's undertaking. So, for example, the first operation that Army Group North is undertaking is called the Baltic Offensive, which essentially is the drive into the Baltic states. And if I click on my 4th Panzergruppen, I can issue an order to launch a blitzkrieg attack, which uses 1 panzer, one command point, uses 1 ammunition, 1 fuel, and 2 aircraft. And so that's basically like Stukas come in, they dive bomb the enemy units, you use an armored fist to break through the enemy lines, and then you advance, in this case I just advanced 30% of the way toward my objective while destroying 3 Soviet infantry and impacting 5 cohesion penalties on them. I also captured some enemy fuel. At that point, I then can choose to reverse my front for another point because now my armored unit is isolated and exposed. And by reversing my front, I've just wiped out an enemy unit that was in my way. And so, I progressed another however far down the line. But what I really like about this game is that the game works in operations. So each front has an objective that it's trying to accomplish, and you have to get to 100% to get there. Once you achieve that objective, you then meet with another objective. So the first objective in Army Group Center is the road to Minsk. Once you take Minsk, it's the road to Smolensk. Once you take Smolensk, I think it's the road to Vitebsk or something like that. And each time you do this, you're running into enemy units, but you're not fighting tactically. You're just giving general orders to army and corps size commands, which I think is really cool because too many, and this is, I belabored the point getting to it, way too many war games, when you're the commander of an entire field of armies, way too many war games tell you, oh, I want to know how this regiment is fighting. I want to move each one of these units across a hill. I want to tell these units to flank this regiment. You're a field marshal. You don't do any of that shit in this game. You don't do any of that. You are basically saying, hey guys, your objective is Minsk. I'm giving you 3 armies to go take that objective. I would like you to use your armored fists to create a pocket and to destroy the enemy units. I would like you to assault enemy fixed positions. I would like you to resupply, refit, get more ammunition. I would like you to, attack or do whatever. And that's what you're doing. You're not issuing tactical orders. Operational plans are drawn up by your subordinates. You're just telling them how to accomplish those. You're just telling them the strategic direction. This is a game that I think gets what being a senior level general is really about way more than games like Strategic Command, where you're commanding every single unit and telling them all what to do. or any kind of tactical game where you tell them every little thing, you want to micromanage every little thing. I think a lot of wargamers have a tendency to want to micromanage. This game isn't about that. It is an operational level, strategic game about World War II on the Eastern Front during the initial German invasion and the initial Soviet counterattack in the winter offensive of 42. And it's only $5 on Steam. The map quality could be improved a bit. There's a few little minor glitches here. I think it's made by like one dude. But I think it's a breath of fresh air. It does a lot of things differently. I've been enjoying myself with it. You can play through a whole campaign in 2.5 hours. I don't think I'm doing a great job of explaining all the reasons I love this game, but I absolutely love this game.
Yeah, I think what you're saying about a lot of games, first of all, I have to say that I think it's okay that a game puts you in the role of the field marshal, but also allows you to play with all the divisions, because that is still fun, and it's a game, and it's completely unrealistic. I think Hearts of Iron 4 was trying to address this by trying to basically force the player not to be able to play with their individual divisions, but make them give it to the AI. And that upset a lot of people. I didn't like that either. However, it's a really good point that we need more games like this. That so I think basically it's unrealistic. Essentially, it's unrealistic to be able to control every division and have perfect cohesion between your different units. Like, they're all attacking at exactly the right time, and there's not battle delay or orders delay, or some of these things are abstracted, like your command points or whatever. But yeah, there's not a lot of games that just really tie your hand and force you to play at the highest level only. Or is there any other game like this? There probably is.
There's elements, so like the war crime stuff that I was talking about, I think Decisive Campaigns has elements of that. But I can't think of a game that does it quite like this. The UI is nothing flashy, nothing special, but I think, and let me just also say, I'm not criticizing games like Hearts of Iron or even War in the Pacific. I love War in the Pacific. It's absurd to think that Nimitz or King really would be ordering around individual ships or individual battalions of infantry to different locations, or telling them, hey, you're a battalion on this army. I want you to fortify. Like, there's elements of that game that are definitely silly, that are not represented in any one position. I think what I love about this game is that, that's fine. But this game does something that I've never seen another game really do this way. There are elements of it that different games do, but I think it's just really cool, the approach that they took with this game, and I think it's very different, and I think it's refreshing.
What's funny is that this game's approach, it's a $5 game, you mentioned. I've only watched your videos on it. I watched one other video on it as well, but it was short, and essentially my only experience of this game is through videos of gameplay. It's funny because this is the easier way of doing it.
Oh, for sure. It's not a complex or intimidating looking game at all. Like, I think the game has some problems in communicating information or what you should be doing. I think there's definitely UI or UX changes that could be made to make things a little bit more clear. But you're right. This has to be a simpler way of doing things than trying to rivet count.
Yeah, and yet people make games like Decisive Campaigns, Barbarossa. This is exactly... We were just talking about Eastern Front games. This is an Eastern Front game that, instead of playing Decisive Campaigns, Barbarossa and having control of all the divisions, which is what that game allows you to do, this would be like, no, in fact... it's kind of like these co-op games that people put together where they take a single-player game and they mimic the chain of command just by introducing a lot of people. It's kind of like what we might be doing in that War in the East game, is that each person will take an army group, and you get your orders about what to do, what priority, like what targets to prioritize in your area from a head leader. And the even more complicated games, I've heard that, what's his name? Telemachus or whatever. He runs co-op games out of the Matrix Forum, where they even go one level further, where you have people controlling cores even. And people have done this with Hearts of Iron games, where you just have one supreme leader doing the research production, but then you have multiple army commands, and the only problem with all of those is that none of those are going to give you the fog of war. Like I said, it's still going to be perfect cohesion for any... And everyone can see the full map, which is already more than people could really do in real life. So, but yeah,
I think Hearts of Iron does like a perfect blend of everything. You know, like you can go down to the nitty and gritty of just dealing division, moving 2 divisions out of the 120 that you have along the front, or you can just tell them, all right, I need you to go to Moscow. I'm assigning, all these 120 divisions to this commander. Just get it done. I'm going to deal with the Western Front. So I like that Hearts of Iron kind of gives you like the choice of doing something like this, where you're more like a field marshal, or you can go down from field marshal all the way down to a division commander level. So,
I mean, I think there's room. I think there's room for both. I think the fact that this game does what it's trying to do and doesn't do everything else, I think is what I appreciate. And I think, there's nothing wrong with a game knowing what it wants to do and knowing what it wants to try and do to make decisions about things it's not going to do. I think it's perfectly acceptable for a game to say, I'm not even going to try and model these other elements. And you know what? I think most games that do that will do a better job at what they do than if they try to do everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. How'd you find this, by the way?
I think I just randomly saw it on Steam. I was looking at some Eastern Front stuff on Steam, and I just saw this thing, and it was like $5. And most games you see on Steam for $5 are not going to turn out to be something that's all that interesting. But I remember I looked at it and I put it in my wish list, and I wasn't very impressed by the map. It didn't look like a high resolution. It looked kind of confusing and a little bit jarring. And I saw some of the screens where you give some of the army order commands, and I was like, oh, okay, is this going to be like a weird block game that's not going to like be something I'm super interested in? And then I, randomly one day, I think I was just like, it's $5. I'm gonna buy it and check it out. And I played it. And I was like, whoa! It's not blocks at all. It's not just mashing blocks and dice together. And I played it, and I ended up playing. I wanted to stream something that night. I couldn't find anything I really felt like playing. So then I ended up starting this thing at like 11 o'clock. I didn't stream it. I played it till about 3 a.m. and just trying to figure it out, trying to learn it a little bit, because it doesn't do a great job of telling you everything you need to know. And then the next day I ended up streaming it for 2.5 hours. It was only a draw. I didn't win, but it was a heck of a fun time. It seemed like a lot of people enjoyed it. We had a really good crowd out. There was a genuine amount of interest in it. I think the key things I would do is figure out a better way to give some feedback to users so that they don't miss it. Figure out a slightly better... There are guides available, but I don't think people are going to read through those, even though they're put together by the developer. Maybe the developer doing a couple of video tutorials might be a good idea. And then improving the overall quality of the map, jacking the resolution up a little bit. I really like the artistic style, because it almost looks like you're playing a World War II atlas, which is really cool. But I think the quality of the imagery needs to be improved a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I guess that leaves me. So the game that I've been playing, so the game I've been playing was Lock and Load, the tactical digital edition that they have. Now, if you guys are not familiar, Lock and Load is a big board game publisher, and they have like tons and tons of board games. But they recently started porting a lot of these board games to, Steam. And I decided to give it a shot. I actually was going through it on Steam, and saw some of the screenshots, and it looked really, really good. It looked like, a beautiful board map for the PC. And, going through some of the screenshots, and it covers multiple wars from like World War II to Vietnam to apparently the Falkland Islands War too, which is really exciting. I have a big interest in that war. So I decided to try it out. Now you can, for $4.99, you can get the base, which is, I believe it gives you about 4 scenarios. And so for $5, it's basically like $1.25 per scenario, and each scenario is about like a half hour or something. So it's basically like a Starbucks coffee. And I was really, really pleasantly surprised at how awesome this game is. It's a perfect kind of it's basically what I wanted. You know, it was basically like, hey, we have this amazing board games that we do, and we want to kind of port this to the computer. This is the way we're going to do it, and they did. And I couldn't think of any better way to do it. The animations are nice. The map is beautiful. You know, it's very easy to learn. You know, like the thing that I was concerned about was when you normally pick up a game, like if me and my buddy Bob decide to play a game, right, a board game, we literally spend like a half hour to an hour going over the rules. And by the end of the rules, I'm like, I need another beer, dude, kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm kind of one of those people that I really don't have a lot of patience. I'm like, dude, let's just start playing the game. Let's just get into it. And the cool thing about this is I bypassed the tutorial, started a scenario, and I said, all right, let me learn the way I like to learn, which is just jumping into the water. And surprisingly, I picked up the game very quickly, played a whole scenario, figured out how movement works, figured out how combat works. So for a noob like me, being able to pick it up in 5-10 minutes, I was really, really nicely surprised. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to. They have so many other wars that they're covering. So one thing that I'm going to do is pick up the other DLCs that they have, and their DLCs are like $4.99. Some are $9.99 for the whole Vietnam one. But I was really pleasantly surprised, and it's available for Windows, and for you Apple folks, it's available for the Mac. So I thought that was pretty cool. The only thing that I was trying to I was doing like a first impressions, and I'm going to publish a review. And what I was kind of like writing up a pros and cons list of this. So I was going through it, and I was like, all right, I got to find a con for this game. Like I got to find 1 or 2 cons, you know, because I have like 6 or 7 pros, you know, like nicely textured map, great value for $5. I like that there's more DLC packs, quick learning curve, cool things like that. So I was adding all these pros, and I was like, shoot, what's a con for this game? Like, what could be improved? What is like the deficit for this game? And I couldn't find any. So I kept spending more and more time trying to find a con. The only thing I found that was that I didn't like for this game was that there's no play by email. And, you know, there is a multiplayer section, but I believe they have to be online at the same time as you. The only thing that I didn't like was that there was no PBEM. And this game is in early access, so you never know. They might add it in the end. But this is a really good deal. I'm hoping that they add it to the iPad and the iPhone. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it because we're bringing the developer on the Developer Dialogue podcast for an interview, and I'm really looking forward to see which board games he decides to bring over, like how he decides, like, hey, we're going to bring over an American Revolution game, or we're going to bring over a Falkland Islands game. You know, I want to know how they do that and their development process and how difficult it was to. I'm sure it's not easy to transition a board game to a full desktop game, you know?
Yeah, Lock and Load, they actually make one of my favorite games of all time. Well, I think it's one of the most realistic. It's one of the most immersive games of all time. It's Command Ops. It's the one that actually has... It's like operational level. You're given order to divisions, maybe actually less than... It could be like companies and stuff. So maybe it's slightly less... It's not quite tactical level. I'd consider it maybe operational, but they have order delays, and you actually have to like predict enemy movements and things like this, which is pretty cool. It feels, like I said, it feels more realistic than your average war game. It's a very hardcore war game, I would say. It's very well done.
Yeah, I know you're big with I think Matt also you really liked that one, right? Command Ops. I remember you played that for a lot.
I like the idea of it. I haven't really played it much at all. No, I know it's a game that Tortuga's talked about really liking a lot, but it's not something I've actually really put any time into. It's one of those games that I see and I'm like, oh, I should give that a go, and then I just haven't gotten around to it.
Well, that does it for me. The next game that I'm playing is Victory and Glory by Lock and Load Publishing. I wanted to kind of play this because it's about the Civil War. And, I feel like this summer is going to be a big Civil War summer kind of thing for games, not
Sure hope not.
not for current events, but we got the big Kahuna coming. The Grand Tacticians, the Civil War 1861 to 1865, and I want to kind of give this game a go before the big blockbuster game comes out. And kind of compare them side by side a little bit.
Cool.
So I guess we move on to, what are you guys drinking? I know, Matt, you decided to get a beverage, so I'm kind of curious.
I did. I am drinking a Truly lemonade hard seltzer. So it's like White Claw, but with lemonade mixed in. So it is...
It's like Mike's Hard Lemonade?
A little bit. Way less sugar than Mike's Hard Lemonade. It's like 1 gram of sugar, so I'm sure there's some chemical in there that's going to kill me in 5 years. But it's all right. My wife really likes them, and that's what we had in the fridge, so that's what I'm drinking.
Wait, I'm kind of curious. You sold your house, right?
We sold our condo.
So are you coming from us from like a hotel room or something?
No, we haven't. I mean, we're still in our condo. We haven't closed on it or anything like that. But we accepted an offer, and we're going to be moving out to the burbs. So no longer in the city of Chicago. We'll be moving out a little bit closer to family back in Wisconsin. It's like 50 minutes closer, and also still in the Chicago area. So. It'll be a change of pace, but I'm hoping it'll be a good one. Excited to see what the next stage of life is.
Well, I think you were saying that you wanted to get a nice pool or porch or something like that.
Pool? No. We have a porch at our place, so I'm looking forward to having access to that, I guess.
Yeah, there's nothing beats that. Like I had like a little porch in my previous apartment. Like I don't know, it was kind of a weird thing, and not a porch, but it's, I don't know. Anyway, it was in the back of the apartment, and you open the door, and it was like the perfect place at night to just crack open a beer and just like look out on this nice little lawn, and it was just there's nothing that beats that,
Porch Talk on the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. Where the guys talk about their wooden decks.
You didn't laminate? Damn you.
I did say the word deck, by the way, just to be clear. D-E-C-K. No double entendre there.
Certainly none implied.
We're still going to do explicit. And Tortuga, what are you drinking?
I just got a Coke.
Jeez, you've been drinking a lot of soda.
Cocaine on Tortuga's end. All right, it's getting wild.
Man, we don't have any. We don't have any alcohol.
Dry house.
I mean, we have whiskey, but for considering this is a single malt strategy, I drink a surprisingly little amount of whiskey, and we always have it stocked here too. It's funny.
Sounds like a missed opportunity.
Sounds like I got to raid Tortuga's home.
Yeah, it's Maker's Mark, and I don't know. I've never gotten into just sipping on Maker's Mark. It's something good, like on occasions, but not as like a every night beverage.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm staying away from. Every time I feel like I have a Coke, like I take a sip of it, or just have it, I feel like, I don't know, like there's some. I feel like nasty afterward. I don't know why. Like I feel like I drank poison, and it's still like, it's a weird thing. Like I feel like they put so much sugar in there, it kind of like puts like a layer in my mouth of sugar.
Probably depends on, I guess, what you're drinking, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely could get that sensation, I suppose.
I think it has something to do with like I don't know if it was MythBusters or somebody, and they cook Coca-Cola, and they showed you how much sugar there is in Coke, like the goop at the end, like that, and it was just like, oh man, it's like, this is what you're drinking. So I've been trying to, I don't know, stay away from things that do that, and stick with, I don't know, alcohol. That doesn't.
Yes, the healthier alternative. None of that sugar water. Give me that stuff for my liver loves me.
Yeah, my liver's going to pay me back, but we have an agreement to a certain time.
I don't know if that's how it works, John.
That does it for this episode of the Single Malt Strategy Podcast. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will catch you guys in the next episode. And be sure to subscribe to our interview podcast, Developer Dialogue. It is on the same podcast app you're listening to this on, where we interview video game developers about their latest games, and we dive into it and get some nice revealing tidbits about your favorite games. So, also be sure to leave a review. I think it's been a while since people left a review. I think it was like 2018. So we got to do like some kind of contest to get people to like do a review. Like, I don't know, make a shout out of their name or something like that. What do you guys think?
You don't need to leave a review, but if you say something funny in the review section, I will give you a shout out.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, say something funny. All right, guys, we'll catch you in the next one.